Hey, welcome back, Star Wars fans. Welcome back, fans of Rule the Galaxy. Today's just a great show. It's going to be a great show, and I already know it just from who's going to be on it with us. But in honor of hashtag Star Wars Podcast Day and hashtag SWPD 2021, terrible with my spelling there. We're going to do this show. We're releasing on Star Wars Podcast Day, which will be February 7th. But as always, you can follow the show at Rule the Galaxy SW on Twitter, or you can email us at ruletheGalaxySW@gmail.com. And last but not least, as you know, we've started toying around with the old YouTube channel, and we're trying to make that happen. So you can follow us at Rule the Galaxy, subscribe to us on YouTube. But today's show is a special show for me because the gentleman that I've got on the show today is just a person that I've looked up to for a number of years. And one of the reasons that Joey and I started doing Rule the Galaxy, we've got Mr. Steve Glosson. Steve, thank you so much for being on the show. And how are you doing?
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. Anytime I can come on a Star Wars specific podcast, it's a good time for me because when I started the show that I do, I was thinking about doing a Star Wars show, but there were so many good ones, or there was at least one really good one out there that it was like there was no sense in throwing my hat in the ring on that. So
Yes.
anytime I can Star Wars it up, I'm down to do so. So it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, no problem at all. Now, I always mess this up. So people can follow you at Steve Glosson on Twitter, but
If
they can
want
also
to.
follow you at, I mess it up. Is it Golaverse or Galaverse?
Well, it's Golaverse.
Yes.
I mean, that's the way I started pronouncing it. That stands for the Geek Out Loud Universe. So yeah, GOL
Gotcha.
averse.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
So
not a soccer thing. Not a soccer thing.
do you get hit with that quite a bit, by the way?
No. But when I tried to get a Golaverse website, like Golaverse.com or some such back in the day,
Yeah.
Soccer stuff came up because
Well, oh
go.
yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And then we're
No.
also, I mean, like I don't do Twitter that much anymore, but we're also Geek Out Loud on Twitter.
Really?
So,
Okay. See, I've
yeah.
got another thing to follow there. So,
Well, no,
and
you don't have to follow it. Listen, nothing's happening, and except when I post a show, it's like, hey, this show's up, everybody. Like
well,
I'm terrible at social media. I don't do much engagement at all. So,
and I'm only really on the Twitter side of things. The Facebook thing, I've kind of removed myself from all that. I know for you and I, Star Wars fans, sometimes being on there is terrible. So I try to stay away from that. You mix in politics, I try to stay away from that. So social media in general, it's a necessary evil. My son makes his living through social media, but honestly, if I could create the happy verse where everybody was just happy and telling good
right,
stories all the
yeah,
time, that's
yeah.
the one I'd want to be on.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, nowadays it just makes me sad. It just makes me sad to be on social media. There's so much negativity and everything, and it's not. Look, it's the reason I started doing Geek Out Loud so long ago. Like it's so funny to think about. Um, Now I guess it's been 12 or 13 years ago this year. I'm not sure. I always forget when I started, but when I started, I did it because there was so much negativity in the geek space. And the negativity then was everything's terrible, everything's awful. Why can't this be more like the comic? Why can't it? And so I was on there like, I love Superman 4. I don't know what you got. I mean, I understand what you guys'
right,
problem with Superman 4 is, but I love it. I liked X-Men 3. I see the problems, I understand it, but let's talk about what we enjoy. And so it
right.
was all about just kind of having fun with stuff, not necessarily making fun of everything or just dumping on everything. And then who knew that all these years later, like the negativity would just turn to such a
Mm,
weird, sad kind of place. Like
it is.
it's really, it's one of those things that it causes you to have to stand back sometimes and think, do I really want to be involved in this anymore? Do I want to go back to the way it was when I was um, in college? Before the days of the internet, and just feel like I'm the only
Right.
person out there that digs this stuff. Know that there's people out there because the shelves keep getting emptied of the collectibles, but
Exactly.
at the same time, it's like, no one in my circle, and that's the other reason I started Geek Out Loud, is because no one in my circle was the geek, person that I could have
Right.
those conversations with and everything. So it was me sitting down and just letting it all out, so I didn't do that to my friends. And then 2008 happened, and Iron Man and the Dark Knight,
Oh yeah.
and it just started a whole wave of things that began to just change the landscape of pop culture,
100%.
which changes the landscape of culture. So now everybody's a Star Wars fan, everybody's a superhero fan, and that's great on one hand, and on the other hand, it's kind of like you miss those good old days sometimes of I remember when it was just me.
Well, I think sometimes I feel like I get on here and I do this show and I just think exactly like you're talking about, whether anyone actually listens or not, it feels good to me. It's a release to
Yeah.
where me and usually I'll have 4 or 5 of my co-hosts on with me and we'll just sit and feel like, oh, that was refreshing just to let all that out and talk about
Mhm.
something. And then we can go back to our wives and our kids and our
Yeah.
jobs and everything like that. So I will give you props though. A couple compliments here. One, the main reason why I listen to your podcast and pay attention to what you do is I think you do an excellent job of letting your passion be felt in what you're talking about. And you can tell that it just means something to you.
Yeah.
To go along with that, the main reason is I think you do an excellent job of just making your listeners and people you interact with feel like your friends. I mean, I'll sit in the car and be listening to a podcast, and it's almost like I've got that person right there next to me. And you do an excellent job of making it feel that way. So I wanted to give you that quick compliment there because that's really the reason I've been bugging you so much to get you on my show.
Well, I loved talk radio as a kid. I always thought that talk radio was just the coolest thing in the world to have a
Hmm.
microphone and sit down and be able to communicate with people who would just listen, and you had no idea who they were, but you just knew they were out there tuning in. And I liked all forms of talk radio. I liked the serious conservative, talk radio in the middle of the afternoon. I Rush Limbaugh was someone, and I know I don't want you to lose
Hmm.
listeners because I, mentioned Del Rushmo,
You're fine.
but
We're an open space here. We're
I
a safe
listened.
tree.
Good, great. I listened to him, and he approached everything with a certain amount of humor and that sort of thing, and then I would listen to the morning shows on the way to school.
Hmm.
I loved morning radio, and the fact that people make fun of it to this day, kind of to me, I feel like it gets a bad rap that it shouldn't get because there's a reason that it's still on the air in some places. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of, as I was a kid, I was making my own radio shows. I was doing
Right.
that kind of stuff and with a little tape recorder and pressing the button and doing. And so when podcasting came along and I was able to figure out how to do it, um, I was like, this is everything I've ever wanted to do and
Oh yeah.
be. And I'm talking about stuff that I enjoy. And if my goal was to actually have people listen, of course, just have a voice that tends to be friendly, and
Right.
one of the things, one of the dirty secrets, is that when anyone would email in the early days, like, oh my gosh, I got an email, it's definitely going to be read on the show. And so we'd open the show with,
Right.
instead of closing it, we would open it with listener feedback and stuff, and that you front load it, and a lot of times that would produce a large portion of the show,
Right.
and so you actually are having a conversation with people. And so if someone's listening and says, oh, they emailed him and he really paid attention to it, I want to email in now and throw
Right.
my hat in the ring. And before you know it, you're rolling through emails and you're bringing people in. And then when we started doing live stuff, like, to me, that's when it was like, now this is it.
Oh yeah.
We are doing live on it. I mean, I know we did the Big Honkin' Show a couple of times on Ustream, which that was a mess. And then the Mixler thing comes along, and it's like you're sitting there interacting with people on Mixler. We were interacting with people before, and so
Yeah.
as you're going along, there are people in the chat, and they begin to develop personalities. They begin to send in stuff to the show, and so you end up with this cast of characters. You're sitting in a room by yourself
Right.
essentially, but you end up with a cast of characters, and the goal is hopefully that everyone feels welcome to be a part of it. Now here's the other thing. The flip side of that is when you get to know me in real life, you're like, wow, what a boring individual.
Really? Well, okay. I guess we'll have to meet in real life because I can't see that. So we'll
Well,
we'll see it at a future convention or
maybe
celebration.
I'm good for about 45 minutes, and then people are like, "All right, I'm tired of Steve."
Okay. Well,
Yeah, that's that.
I get what you're saying completely because recently we had Adam Bray on
Oh,
who
Adam's the best.
he is, gosh, he was so much fun. He told some crazy stories.
Yes.
But it was great because I just sent it out and said, "Hey, Adam Bray is going to be on. What do you want to ask him?" And we had someone who was knee deep intense on a question they had to ask him. And so
Yeah.
we brought it up, and that person's been tweeting with us ever since about
Nice.
that
Great.
one question,
Yeah.
right? Mark Newbold with Anthrax the other day, I was listening to his show, and he went for probably 45 minutes on just a listener's message, like what they had
Yeah.
sent across to him, but it was great content. And I told him, I was like, that was great because you had that the listener give you that, and then you just mowed right through it. So
Right.
it's great. And in a world where, okay, the COVID world is one thing, but in a world where we're all moving to where we're stuck in our phones or stuck at looking at computer
Hmm.
screens, I think this is really podcast for me, both listening and now doing this makes everything feel much more of a community. It makes
Yeah.
for like
Yeah.
we're not alone, right? And we
Right.
have those people out there with similar interests. So, yeah, I love it. Now, I didn't do much research, so I apologize. But
That's fine. There's
I,
nothing to research.
so my brother works for a church here in Indianapolis,
Hmm.
and he's on our show a lot. And then my cousin Nick, who's one of my usual co-hosts, he is a youth minister at a church here in Indianapolis.
Bless his heart.
Is And now, are you or is someone else in your family actually? I know you work at a church, but are you a minister or a preacher? What is it
Um,
you do?
it's someone in my family. I was born a preacher's kid.
Okay.
So yeah, my dad's a pastor. I was not going to be a pastor my whole life. I did youth ministry for about on and off in different forms, whether it was an internship or just a summer work program, that kind of thing. Or then full-time youth ministry for like 15 years.
Hmm.
Um, I tried to do the thing where I'm just the guest speaker at places. That went over like a lead balloon. And because again, people find out, hey, he's really a jerk. Um, and then um, yeah, where I'm at now, I'm actually the pastor of the church that I'm in now. So
Really?
so that's me. Yeah, and that's a fun tightrope to walk when people are like, "Hey, I saw that you have this podcast." And I'm thinking, there are times in my life during the run of these different shows where maybe I wasn't walking with Jesus like I needed to be, and there might have been words that came out that didn't need. I don't know that I want people discovering these shows at all. So I try to give my congregation enough content with other stuff to be like, hey, check this out. Go over here. Don't look for me online. Just
Well, I look, I've listened to you a few different times bring up things about your faith and about your beliefs. And I think that's important. We don't overly preach on our show, but we've
right.
done shows on Star Wars and Christianity and
Yeah.
things like that. And I think it's important, but I'm glad you're doing that. Nick and Tony were both going to try to be on here today because they wanted to talk to you about that, but
Yeah.
they both got tied up at work and couldn't do that.
I
So
understand how that goes. That's the thing with the jobs we do. It's feast or famine as far as how busy you are.
yep.
Um, and so you may have a week where it's like, oh, I should have done like 50 podcasts last week and because the next week it's like, I'm headed here, I'm headed there, I'm doing this, I'm doing that,
Right.
I'm doing these things, And then if you are like me, where I do four, let's see, five, by the end of February, I'll be doing 5 different like studies, whether it's the sermon or a
Mhm.
Sunday school or a small group Bible study. I'll be doing 5 of those a week, by the end of February. So there's a lot of preparation and stuff that goes into those things, as well as just the pastoral duties and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, the thing is Geek Out Loud really got big when I didn't have a job, and I was trying to make podcasting my job.
Sure.
Unfortunately, as I had gotten into podcasting and I began to get myself established, along came the celebrity podcasters who,
Yes.
they really are like, and so suddenly they've got the attention of all the big guys and the big names and everything. And so it makes it harder for the little guy to get in there
It
and
does.
really make much of anything happen. But here's the great thing. You mentioned the community. if you find a community that buys into who you are and buys
Yep.
into your product, then they're going to support you however they can. And I've been really blessed to have a lot of people support, whether it's through Patreon or clicking through Amazon links or whatever the case may be. And so, um, but now that I have a full-time job and stack on top of that, I got married, that changes the dynamic of life in a big way.
Huge.
So, so there's been a lot of shows that have been cut back on, and trying to just find that balance. I'm not good at balancing time anyway. I'm usually like either all or nothing with things. And so I have a hard time kind of I'm not a good Jedi. In fact, if I were in Star Wars, I would be Dex from Dex's
Okay.
Diner. Yeah, that's who I would be. People are like, what kind of job would you have in Star Wars? Like, I'd be like Dex, running a diner. Now, I might have a lot to say when the Jedi come in. Hey, have a seat, fellas. But, I'm not going to be out there fighting the wars and swinging a lightsaber around. I'll be, flipping burgers and, slinging some Jawa juice out there. But that's
Hey,
about all I got going on for me.
we've all got our roles. We've all got our roles we've got to play here. So,
Well, that's what, to me, now, see, this is where I told you I was going to derail you.
No, I like it.
Careful. To me, that's what's so amazing about the general Star Wars fan. Most Star Wars fans, when they start thinking, what would I be in the galaxy? They jump to Jedi or Sith. They're like, would I be a Jedi or Sith? Not my wife. When I watched through Star Wars, she's like, I think I'd be a great Jedi. No, you wouldn't. I told her, I'm like, if you had the ability to use the Force, you would be a Sith Lord. There's no getting around it. The way that because you'd have all the best intentions, just like Anakin, and you would end up going to the dark side. You'd use that. And she's like, well, what would you be? I'm like, I'd be Dex. I would be a diner. I'd be a side character at best. There are a lot of other things that are going on.
Yes.
Just keep me off of Tatooine. I don't want to live out in the desert, And I said I'd either be Dex or I'd be a fat Ewok. There's no, there's no in between. And in the Ewok life, I don't think I could get behind. That's too much camping for me. I don't believe in outdoors, so I really do. But everyone else like, I'd be a Jedi, I'd be a Sith. No, you wouldn't. You'd be a janitor. You'd be a bus driver.
Exactly. I mean, look where we are today, right?
You'd be a Star Wars podcaster. You'd be a podcaster in the Star Wars universe.
That's right.
Talking about all the events that's going on, the conspiracies about the Jedi and the Sith.
I would be talking about Palpatine and watching my back and making sure that, I could get home at night and things like that. So
see, that's the other thing. It's like, if you're around when the Empire comes to power, then what are you? That's the question. Are you going to be rebellion, or are you going to try to fly under the radar? And at some point when they come knocking on your door, you've got to make that decision, because that's the evil empire. And when those stormtroopers come up in their plastine armor, you got a choice to make: feed them or run.
100% agree. I mean, I think you're right. So many people jump to that easy decision. I like cantinas. I don't drink a lot, so I wouldn't get high on my own supply, right? I could be a bartender.
Yeah, just be a bartender. Like, how you doing today? And and it's like, saw the weirdest creature come through here today.
That's right.
Never knew they existed. I'd always heard about them, but I never knew.
Yes.
Some dude shot a Rodian over in the corner today.
I had to clean up the blood.
The Rodian shot first. He flipped me a coin.
That's right.
All I gave me a credit for all my troubles. I had to dispose of the body, for crying out loud. There's a Rodian over there. Do you know what burnt Rodian smells like? It's terrible. Now, some people say the Rodian shot first, but I didn't see that. All I saw was the dude shoot him.
Somebody yelled McClunky. I didn't hear it.
And we don't like that language in our establishment.
Right.
People trying to bring droids in. They're shooting Rodians. Before that, some old dude cut a guy's arm off.
That's right. I mean, look at the action he's had right there, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
no blasters. Yeah.
I mean, we've just right there. We've redefined. All you listeners today know you wouldn't be a Sith or a Jedi. You'd either be a fat Ewok, you'd be Dex, or you'd be a barkeep at the cantina.
Well, that's me. Now you may have listeners out there to be Jedi. There's some great people out there that would totally be great at being a Jedi. There's some people who'd be great at being a Sith, but I just know me personally.
Yeah.
There's not, unless I could be the dude who sits down, with Obi-Wan, is like, well, that's a Camino saber dart, That's what that is.
Depends on how big your pocketbook
That's right. Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to derail you.
Great.
What the heck? Okay, so I wrote this note down 2 days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I prepared myself, and then sure enough, on Twitter pops up a story about Brian Austin Green.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get connected? And did you interview Brian Austin Green about
Mm-hmm.
being a Star Wars fan? And
Yeah.
then now all of a sudden, like I said, I was thinking it, wrote it down, and I looked on Twitter and he talked about how he's building R2D2
Building
for the last
R2D2.
15 years.
Yeah, for half his life he's been building that thing. I when I got into podcasting, there were two shows that I listened to. And again, remember this is the 2000 aughts. So
Yes.
this is 07, 08. Two or three podcasts I listened to. Among them were the Force Cast, which is now the guys on Rebel Force Radio.
Yep.
And I was into Smallville, loved the show Smallville.
Okay.
And so there was a Smallville podcast called Starkville House of L. They're based out of Starkville, Mississippi. These guys, they were a bunch of college guys who watched the show and loved the show and were doing it. They were funny. It was like Sports Center for a recap show. I mean, they were really good at what they did and funny
Okay.
and professional. And as I started to podcast, I just kind of reached out to them when they said, "Hey guys, look, I do this show. I don't really talk Smallville because you guys have the market cornered on that, but I love Smallville and love you guys." And they had a tab on their website at the time that said friends. And I'm like, well, maybe one day we can be friends. And maybe that was even the subject line. Well, for whatever reason, the host of that show, Derek Russell, saw the email. It caught his attention. He read it, and around that time, I didn't realize it, but around that time, because when you're in college, you graduate, you go your separate
Mhm.
ways. There were some guys who were leaving, and he was kind of left wanting to do it, but he didn't have a co-host, so he was bringing in guest host, and he brought me in, and we just kind of clicked on this one episode where we just kind of did it together. And he asked me to come back. Next thing we know, we're doing this show, and we and so we're doing this show on Smallville. It's kind of a big deal,
Mhm.
again, podcasting very new.
Right.
You didn't have Joe Rogan out there doing his
Jeez.
thing. You didn't have Kevin Smith doing his thing yet. And so we're plugging along doing great. Well, then Fox starts up this Terminator show, the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Right.
And Derek's like, "Hey, we need to jump in on this." And I think Derek's mindset was at the time, and I don't know this, I've never actually talked to him about this. I don't know that he was a fan of Sarah Connor, of the Terminator franchise necessarily, but the idea of there's a new show, it looks really good. Because he had media press stuff, he had been sent a screener of the pilot, and he was really into the pilot episode. He's like, "You need to see this. We need to do a show on this. We'll call it Sky Next instead of Skynet.
Mhm.
And we'll just do the same thing we do with Starkville House of L." And it was so funny because we started out with that show, and we were very straight-laced, kind of like, and I
Professionals.
hated, I
Yeah.
was bored to tears. And I forget, it was one night we were recording, and just kind of got silly and started having fun with it. And from that point on, the show really got to be fun. Well, unbeknownst to us, Brian Austin Green, who played Derek Reese, Kyle Reese's brother on the show, was looking to see what fans were saying, what people were saying, and he found our podcast.
Wow.
And so he was listening to the podcast and digging what we were doing and stuff. And now I was never a 90210 guy or anything. Like, Brian Austin Green to me was Derek Reese from the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And I loved what he did on that show. I loved how he was. Well, come to find out, he's listening. He emails us, and I'm like, "This isn't real." Derek, we're going back and forth like, "This isn't real. This isn't real." Well, sure enough, one night I've gone to bed. I'm laying in bed, and my phone goes off, and it's a number I don't recognize from out in California. It's like, "Hey, Steve." I'm like,
Oh
"Who is this?" He's like, "Hey, this is
gosh.
Brian. Just want to say I hate that," because I was unable to actually be on the show when he and Derek spoke the first time we were going to interview him on the Sarah Connor show.
Right.
And so I said, "Well, I know you like Star Wars and stuff. Why don't you come on Geek Out Loud?" And so he came on Geek Out Loud and we talked Star Wars and joked around and everything. Well, then Sarah Connor folded after 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And because he knew we were into Smallville, he got a chance to go be Metallo on Smallville, a Superman villain, Metallo. So now we're going to have him on Starkville House of L. And so we, I never was the one to like, I'm going to keep the lines of communication open because like,
Right.
I don't want to bother this dude and everything. Well, Derek got the idea to, hey, we should do a podcast. And we did a whole skit with him on the Starkville House of L, where it's like we had gotten him contractually bound to be our friend. And so we did that whole sketch, kind of like a cold open to the show. And then so bouncing off that very obscure joke, we started the podcast with Brian Austin Green. And I've not been able to continue doing that. I had to step away just for time's sake and everything. Derek has continued to do it. And because Brian has kind of gotten back into the spotlight with the Masked Singer or whatever it is, he's been making some waves. Unfortunately, he had the divorce that went on, he and Megan Fox split up. And so that caused some ripples in the entertainment industry, and so they're out there tagging with BAG Pod and all this other stuff. And he and Derek are doing great, but
That's awesome.
I could text Brian now and he'd just give me a hard time about not doing the show with him anymore. So
that is awesome. I mean, see how one little thing, just one little thing leads to that. And it was just so weird. And like I said, I was kind of freaked out because I was like, is Twitter listening to me? Because I had said, oh, Brian Austin Green. I wrote it down and then boom, the tweet popped up and I was like, something weird's going on.
Yeah, it's something in the air. And also, they're watching you.
Yes, that could possibly be it. So
that's how it goes.
I've taken you on all kinds of non-Star Wars things. What do you think the coolest Star Wars thing you've ever done is? I mean, you could do it pre-podcast days and during podcast days.
Oh, wow. Well, pre-podcast days, the coolest Star Wars thing I ever did was Star Wars Celebration 3 with my friend Marcus, who is also a pastor. It was up in Indianapolis,
where I'm my hometown,
and up in the Blue Zone, and I believe that's what it was called. We got to the parking lot of the what is the arena there?
It used to be RCA Dome. Now it's Lucas Oil Stadium.
Okay, well, this is when it was RCA Dome.
Yep.
And we parked and we're getting out, and Marcus is doing something in the trunk, like getting some stuff out or whatever. And I'm sitting there with a camera that I brought because I had these grandiose ideas of making like this whole thing, which for who knows. But I'm sitting there and there's just this wall and it's all blue, huge, big wall, all blue, has the horseshoe on it for the Colts or whatever. Yep. And it's like, you've entered the blue zone. And I'm like, the blue zone. It was a cold morning in April. And it was such a mess. The lines to get in were long. It was just a horrible, horrible time in life. But this is when I learned what Star Wars fans love to do. Star Wars fans love to wait in line. That's what we love to do. And
we probably crossed in line.
There's no telling. We were out there in that line that morning, and I just got hyper. Like I just got silly. And I started like shouting to the people up on the parking deck across the street who were looking at us. I was, just jawing with people around. It's like, hey guys, what are you guys up to? Blah, 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 yakety smackety, blah, blah. And then the little documentary crew, from Lucasfilm comes by, because they were always documenting everything. And they're like, hey, can we talk to you a little bit? So I talked to them for like 5 or 6 minutes, and next thing I know, there's a special feature. It might have been post podcast that this special feature actually came about, but there was something on the website, and then eventually it's on a special feature on one of the Blu-rays where I'm standing there and I'm like, it's just fun. It's a blast. Like that is my claim to Star Wars fame. I'm standing there. I'm like, it's just fun. It's a blast. But that was a great time because that was like this. It was ridiculous how crowded it was.
Yes.
How out of control everything seemed. But just how much fun we had at the same time. And it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. I'd never been to any other convention or anything like that. I'd been to a comic book show in a hotel,
Oh yeah. I'm
hotel ballroom kind of setting where, they've got hotel, what do you call it, executive area, where they just were a bunch of tables set up with
yeah.
a bunch of different dealers, but no appearances, no panels, and so, and then to be in the room with Rick McCallum as he's
Mm.
showing like footage from episode 3 that's going to be coming out in like 3 weeks, and oh, it was just amazing. It was such a good time. That was a Star Wars highlight for me. Um, and then post podcast, as far as Star Wars highlights go, you know, again, it's the celebration stuff. It's friends. Riley and Bethany Blanton from the Star Wars Report, getting to know those guys, getting to know Jason and Jimmy Mack from Rebel Force Radio. There's so much I've done thanks to Rebel Force Radio actually throwing me a bone and coming on Geek Out Loud and then eventually letting me be on their show. Um, it's going down with Jimmy Mack to Star Wars weekends in Orlando.
That's some of my
And
favorite stories is hearing you run through the count through
oh yeah,
the
yeah,
place.
yeah.
Oh my
Well, there was
gosh.
no running. There was just some brisk walking, and I was dying. But like I realized I've got a picture of me and Warwick Davis,
That's
and
awesome.
it's not from where I paid to get a photo
Right.
op. It was where we sat down and spoke with him, and then afterwards took a quick picture. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I grew up as a kid loving the Ewoks, loving Return of the
Hmm.
Jedi, and even had a part of our yard that we called, it was really grown up with trees and some undergrowth and stuff, and we called that little corner of our yard the Ewok Forest. And it was such an informative time and such a great character. And then I loved Willow too. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I love Willow. I love that
It's
movie,
okay.
but
I
but
tried to
the,
talk my wife into watching that last night.
but it was the first time in my Star Wars fandom that I realized I'm standing here with my childhood. I'm standing here with
Hmm.
someone who meant the world to me as a kid, and it was just really such a cool moment. Other than that, like getting to know and be able to say that I consider him a bit of a friend is James Arnold Taylor,
That's
the
awesome.
voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He spoke and gave his testimony at a worship service that was put on, that I was privileged to speak at a Star Wars
Hmm.
celebration down in Orlando. And that was a big highlight Star Wars wise for me as well. But it really comes down to the friends made, to the
Yeah.
relationships built, that sort of thing. I remember at the last Star Wars celebration I was able to go to was in 2012, and we were all sitting around. Was it 2012? Was that when it was? Um,
We had
when
2019,
when did the
2017,
Disney sale happen?
20, oh gosh, 2012, 2013. One of
Okay,
those
yeah,
2 years.
yeah. So it would have been in 2012 when they bought. It was a few months before they bought.
Yeah. October, wasn't it Halloween?
Yeah, October of 2012. Yeah, so a
Yep.
few months before that all went down. We were in line for the closing ceremonies of celebration. I'm sitting there with Riley and Bethany and a few other friends and stuff. And I think Michael Cohen might have been there. He was bouncing all over the place with us. I shout out to Steve Mitchell, who is of the 501st, who was one of the first people I met the first time I went to Celebration by myself, and Celebration 5 down in Orlando, and we got to hanging out. And he is the founding member of Team Steve. And but so we're all sitting around getting ready for closing ceremonies. And it's that thing where they had promised an announcement. They'd promised a
Hmm.
big announcement. And I kept making the joke of, well, I tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be George is going to walk out on the stage and he's going to say 7, 8, 9. And he's going to drop the mic and he's going to walk away. And the crowd is going to go nuts
Yep.
because that's all they needed to hear.
That's
7,
it.
8, 9. And because at that celebration, Mark Hamill was there, Carrie Fisher was there. Um, it seemed like all of the stars were aligned. Um, there were rumors that Harrison Ford was floating around, and that one, but he wasn't there, of course. But I just, there was just something that seemed like there was something big in the
Right.
works. And so my joke was 7, 8, 9, and I even made people start to think that. Like, I didn't believe it in my heart of hearts. I told people, but like, I wanted everyone else to kind of get geared up for it. Well, the big announcement was, as I recall, Star Wars Celebration Europe is going to be in Germany, and at the closing ceremony, they had shown some 3D footage from episodes 1, 2, and 3,
Right.
because they'd released episode 1 in 3D at that point, but they hadn't done the other. Well, a few months later, I'm just kind of minding my own business, and my phone begins to blow up. And one of the first people who got in touch with me was Derek, the aforementioned Derek, and
Yep.
podcasting partner for life. And he's like, "Have you heard?" I'm like, "Heard what?" And I'm thinking there's some bit coming. He's like, $4 billion. Lucas just sold Lucasfilm to Disney and they're going to do Star Wars 7, 8, and 9.
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, then it became, well, Steve's a prophet. Steve's a prophet. I'm like, no. And then, but what's funny is, come to find out, either they were going to announce the sale at Celebration, but everything hadn't been finalized, or they were going to announce 7, 8, and 9, and the sale was stopped him from announcing that, because Michael
Wow.
Long had apparently already worked on the scripts and everything. And I'm just like, oh, what could have been?
Man,
Been amazing. But
that's
not,
it. That's great
those,
though.
yeah, those types of things are really the Star Wars highlights for me. The friends made, the experiences had,
I
is
agree.
just, it's more of a highlight than any movie or any TV show, that they've put out.
It's like I said, listening to that group that you just mentioned there, I've been listening to all of these shows for, gosh, 9, 10 years now, right? And so again, I feel like I'm almost part of what they do, just because I've been right there since then. But with our show, with our podcast, I'm surrounded by my brother, my son, uh, one of my cousins who I grew up with, one of my cousins who's very young, my best friend from high school, a family friend who I had no idea he liked Star Wars until I invited him to the Rise of Skywalker
Mhm.
with us for the opening night. And we are now like inseparable. Like,
All right.
we
Yep.
talk all the time. And if it's not a text coming from one of us to all of us, it seems like a weird day that we
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
that now,
Yeah.
and so it's really built this bond. And my wife, even, she's like, okay, I'll buy in on this, right? I mean,
Right.
you're turning 50 this year. We'll let you slide on on some of your stupidity. But going back to your Ewok story, I crack up because similar things. When my son was little, my aunt and uncle lived way out, an hour from here. But we'd go there as a family on different times, like on weekends, because it's this great pool, big family get together. But when we did, we'd always pass by this patch of just forest. And every time
Yeah.
we get past it, I'd be like, Joey, hey, look, watch for Wicket. See if Wicket, look for the Ewoks. And
Yeah.
he would sit with his face glued towards that window. He's like, I think I saw one. Wait, I think I saw
Yeah.
one. And
Yep.
I mean, come on, let's face it. It doesn't get much better than that, to have
Yeah.
those kind of memories at all.
Listen,
So
I loved the Ewoks back then. And it's one of those things that I always said early on when I started podcasting, was I had to get on the internet to find out people didn't like Ewoks.
isn't that
Like,
sad?
to me, it was just something I thought everybody dug and liked, and didn't realize they were going to end up being a joke or a throwaway. And I'm glad to see them getting some more love nowadays.
They
I
are.
think that people are starting to love on them a little bit more than they used to. But yeah, I've been an Ewok fan since the Pepperidge Farm cookies, came out. Before we ever saw Return of the Jedi, there were these Pepperidge Farm cookies, and they were character cookies, and so they'd have these characters on there, and one of them was Wicket, and so we thought going in, that they were called Wickets. We didn't realize they were called Ewoks, and so, but
How did I
then,
miss that? I grew up at that time. How did I miss those cookies?
I don't know. I almost remember how they taste, even,
Oh
like,
my gosh.
if I tasted anything like them, I would remember that.
Well, I've really become going back into the retro thing in the past 6 months. I've bought all the Droids and Ewoks cartoons. I've bought the Ewoks movies that happened after Return of the Jedi. And not to say that any of it's great, but it definitely brings back an era of nostalgia
Yeah.
to a simpler time of just like, this is kind of fun and silly, right? I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
so, but yeah, I really enjoy that. I do have to ask you, because I think you and Scott Ryfun have a different answer on this. Are you more, I see the collection behind you there, but
Mhm.
in general, are you more of an unboxing or keep in the box kind of person with your Star Wars figures?
I am very much, it depends. It depends on what I've, what it looks like in the package versus what it
Hmm.
looks like out of the package. Um, with these that you see on the wall, I keep these on the card just because I love the nostalgia of the
Hmm.
vintage style cars and everything. For those that are just listening, it's vintage collection Star Wars, Hasbro Star Wars on my wall. Um, but I'm not opposed to opening. If I could swing, and I don't want to swing the camera around. Everything's in a mess in here.
No, you're fine.
But you'd see just how much is not in the package. Like there's because to me, part of the fun of toys is opening them and
Yes.
displaying them, as they're meant to be displayed. I've got a shelf that goes from the floor to the ceiling with a lot of my vintage toys from my childhood, and then a couple of pieces I've picked up, since my childhood. But but by and large, unless they're on these vintage cards, I'll open it up.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of opening, and I know that grinds the gears of some people, but I decided a long time ago that I'm not going to make a fortune. I'm not going to make my retirement off of collecting toys.
No.
Um, and so if I'm going to collect, if I'm going to have anything, I want it to be because I think it looks cool and it's something that's fun and it's something that kind of makes me happy to see around.
Yep.
Haven't always been that way, there was a time where it's like, I got to get them all, got to have everything, and then there was a period where I started to sell some things off, and that was a lesson learned, like, hey, I can live without some of this stuff if I have
Right.
to, and it made me a little sad, especially if I sold some of the vintage stuff that I had, but by and large, I realized I can live without it. It's not hurting me to not have it. Um, so that I think there's a healthy way to be. If you like the way they look when they're in the box, on the card, whatever the case may be, leave them there. And Hasbro has, with their Black series,
Hmm.
finally come back around to some really good looking packaging.
Agreed.
Um,
Some of the new
you
stuff
know,
is fabulous.
like here's the Tebow. It's kind
Love
of
it.
dark, but like I love the artwork on the side of these boxes and everything. And that leaves you then the question, do I open or do I not? Because like I think it looks just as good displayed in the box, because you can actually line these things up
Oh
bookshelf
yeah.
style and make a nice little arrangement, or you can pull them open and have them, or you can actually open them, have them lined up behind you, and then if you want to put them back in, you can put them back in the box. Like
That
I,
is the one thing about the 6 inch I like better is that
yeah,
setup. Yes, because you could take
yeah.
it out, slide it back in, still looks good in the packaging. Once you bust that bubble on that vintage,
Yeah,
you're
once you rip open a card, it's open, buddy. There's no going back. Yeah, there is no going back on that.
well. Again trying to keep it to Star Wars, but I will tell you that I had not watched any of the Marvel movies. I had not
Bless your
watched
heart.
one, but I'd listened to your show so much and just heard the passion you had for some of the characters and some of the music and so I talked my wife into it. Now with Disney Plus,
Yeah.
we are 3/4 of the way through
Oh
of of
yeah.
of the of the universe. Yeah.
Which is the last one you watched?
We're up to Doctor Strange,
Oh
I think.
wow. So you've come through Civil War and everything.
Oh yeah, I really liked Civil War. I like Captain like that's something I was going to talk to you about.
Mhm.
Captain America is my Marvel guy.
Sure.
Batman is my DC guy. Those are
Yeah.
my guys. So I've really enjoyed the Captain Marvel or Captain America on the
Captain
Marvel.
America movies. Well, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, with Captain America, the first movie, the first Avenger,
Hmm.
was such a return to the things that people of my generation, kids of my generation, loved about the old superhero movies, because the 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 superhero movie that all superhero movies are judged by, and rightfully so, is Superman the movie.
Agreed.
And there's some talk, and Dave Jones, who listens to this show, is going to be like, now, Steve, come on now. But the truth is like for most of history, Superman the movie did it. Of course, Batman came along in 1989, and
Yep.
that added some rules to the rule book. But when you watch Captain America: The First Avenger, it's this great origin story of this great character who just he's just a good, wholesome dude.
Yep.
And it has such a tragic ending, like when it's
Oh,
like I missed a date. I had a date, and it's like, oh, you're breaking my heart over here, Cap. But the way he deals with that, the way he plows through, so that when you get through Avengers, and his moral compass is still very much intact. You get through Avengers and you get to Winter Soldier, and that moral
oh yeah.
compass is now causing him to call into question everything he thought was good. And Winter Soldier is, it's one of those movies, like, I forget how much I like it until I sit and watch it again. And it really is my favorite superhero sequel, and it beat out Superman 2 for that honor. Superman 2 for all my life was my favorite superhero
Wow.
sequel, and then I saw Winter Soldier. And there hasn't been a superhero sequel that has done that for me since, as far as that kind of thing goes. Even with what you've got coming down the
In
road
front of me. Yeah.
with yeah. But I'm going to tell you, Civil War was something that I hated in the comics. I hated heroes fighting heroes.
Yep.
I felt like, if either ramp your villains up, give them something to fight, because to me, what Civil War in the comics represented was this watering down of what is good, and this elevating the conflict of the evil, and villains became so complex and everything,
Right.
and it made your superheroes look like, well, they're just losers. And so, to try to add shades of character to all the superheroes, they end up being bad guys and making bad choices. And it's like,
Right.
come on, we're not swapping sides. And so Civil War was just the culmination of that, was like just bad choice after bad choice. And now we're all fighting each other. And I didn't like it. And so I was not anxious for it. In fact, when they announced Captain America Civil War, they did it at like one of these D23 panels.
Hmm.
And when Kevin Feige first announced it, it's Captain America and the Serpent Society, and there was like a smattering of applause and everything. I'm like, that is so cool. They're going to have the Serpent Society. That is amazing. But no, but then he circles back around. It's like, instead we're going to do Civil War, and everyone's, yeah, because I'm in the minority of fandom. I get that.
Yeah.
But I never would have thought I would enjoy Civil War the way I did. And then what Civil War becomes, as you watch the final Avengers movies, what Civil War means to those movies is so much more impactful than you even think it could be.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
and so yeah, it's absolutely what Marvel Studios did in 2008 with Iron Man. Was
My
some-
wife loves Iron Man. That's
well,
her
I
guy.
mean,
She
it's
she
sincerely, it's
yeah.
something that had not been done in the superhero genre honestly, since Superman the movie. Batman in 1989 was a cultural phenomenon, but there are markers in superhero cinema in my life. Superman the movie in 1978, Batman 89 was this cultural thing that was just amazing, but it didn't really re-energize it didn't do anything to really move that superhero genre forward, because everything was so caught up in developmental mess. Marvel was over here doing these weird things with, their Captain America movie and this Fantastic Four thing that never got made or never got released and all this stuff, which they're fun anomalies. They're fun things to kind of think about and look at. But then when the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man comes around, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, they were game changers.
Mhm.
X-Men kind of set the fuse, but Spider-Man lit the fuse. And then from there, we're off to the races in a really special way when it comes to the superhero genre. But by 2008, there was already talk of, well, maybe it's time for superhero fatigue. Maybe superhero fatigue is set in. Well, here comes The Dark Knight on the DC Warner Brothers side of things, which just was like something no one thought could be done.
Yep.
This crime thriller it just happens to star a superhero. And then here's Iron Man. Iron Man, who was a C-list
Oh
character.
yeah.
Now, look, people can argue that he was one of the first Avengers. Well, sure he was. But by the time you get to 2008, Iron Man's not a household name. Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk are household names. Even with a movie, Daredevil was not a household name. There were a lot of things that they tried that just, even with the success of the X-Men films, they were still just very niche. Well, here comes Iron Man, and the way that Tony Stark, or the way that
Oh
Robert
yeah.
Downey Jr. was Tony Stark, the way that they, obviously it wasn't Disney at the time, it was Paramount, remember?
Right.
So you can't say you had the Disney machine behind you. This was before the Disney buyout of Marvel. You just had this thing that happened, and it caught on. It caught on because of that character, because of the humor they made. And so now Iron Man's this household name. Like, he's the number one guy. I think
Right.
that Iron Man, to many people of this generation, he's more popular than even Spider-Man. And that's unheard of in, when it comes to Marvel fandom. And so, and so that kicked off this thing, and that post-credit sequence of Iron Man, when he's standing, there's Nick Fury,
Oh yeah.
and he's like, I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. It was that thing like, well, they can't do that. They can't, this can't be done. What are they thinking? Who do they think they are? They put the X-Men in black leather back in it. They're not going to do the Avengers justice. Sure, they got Iron Man right, but they're not going to. Well, here comes
Oh yeah.
the Incredible Hulk, and people didn't like the Incredible Hulk. I love the Incredible Hulk movie. I thought that it was because of how superior it was to what Ang Lee had done earlier in the 2000s. It was this great movie. There was great. I thought there was great pathos to it and everything else. And then Iron Man 2 comes along, and that's when everyone's like, oh, they're just trying to do too much to connect everything. Like, people hated on Iron Man 2. I'm like, what are you talking about? Did you not see him and War Machine fighting against all those drones?
That was
That was
absolutely awesome.
amazing.
Yes.
Did you see him save the kid in the Iron Man mask? And it was like, good job, kid. That's everything you want as a superhero fan. And then Thor comes along, people are like, it's all right, it's okay. I'm like, Thor was amazing. No one could ever do a Thor movie. And they did, and it was funny, and it was charming, and it was so
And it had Natalie
awesome.
Portman, which is not bad.
Yeah. And it's so awesome there when they think he's dead, and he just grabs the hammer out of the sky. The hammer comes to him, and he shows up, and she's like, is this how you normally look? He's like, yeah, it's a good look. You're like, yes, it is. Get him, Thor. And then then you end up with Captain America and that first Avengers movie, man. It's just like, what am I watching? I love Derek. He told me when we were talking about it after we'd both seen it. Derek said, I'm sitting there watching it, and I kept expecting someone to come out and shut everything down and close the curtain, and be like, "You're not supposed to see this." You're not supposed to see this. And I remember watching it, and the first time Bruce turns into the Hulk on the helicarrier. And he goes running through, and then all of a sudden he just gets tackled out of the side of the screen, and it's Thor.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I forgot how much I love Thor and Hulk fights, because this is gonna be amazing. And then they're fighting. I'm like, this is not something I should have got to see. The last Thor Hulk fight I remember was from the Bill Bixby Return of the Incredible Hulk show, that where it was some dude, he's like, this will send you back to hell, you ugly troll, and he threw a weird hammer, and it was just, but this is Thor and Hulk, and it was amazing. And the whole time I'm just like, this is. And then when Thanos turns his head during that during that mid-credit sequence, and I knew exactly who it was.
Yes.
I knew exactly who it was, and like, there was that, because it's still early in the days of people not knowing stuff,
right?
But as he turns and smiles, and I'm like, the dude who was with me, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. And he's like, who is that? Who's that? I said, you have no idea who that is. And what was awesome was the line that gets Thanos to turn his head and smile is, to challenge them would be to court death. And in the comics, Thanos was infatuated with the entity of death. Like, he was in love with the entity death.
Right.
And so when he says to court death, and Thanos turns around and smiles, I'm like, Thanos has a crush, and of course they turned it into something a little bit different as you move along, but it was just like, dude, I'm telling you. And so then you're like, it'll never get better than this. It'll never get better than this. And Winter Soldier comes along. Iron Man 3, the only thing that I was disappointed in Iron Man 3 was the big twist of the dude wasn't the Mandarin.
Yes.
He was just an actor.
Yes.
And that was the one time in these movies that I'm like, I'm such a geek loser, because I'm going to get my panties in a wad over this situation. But I've rewatched it since. Of course, I've rewatched it since. And that movie plays so well on so many different levels. Um, and it sets up everything else that's going to be happening down the road in a lot of good ways. But yeah, there's just so much that they've shown that it's like, I can't believe they're actually getting away with showing us this, because in the early 2000s when the X-Men came out, you know,
Hmm.
it was like, well, we can't really make them look like they look on screen or on the comic page, because no one would buy that, you know. I was a fan of Smallville, and it's like, well, you know what, no one's going to buy flights or tights, no flights, no tights, you know, we got to keep him in street clothes and that sort of thing. And it became this whole thing of he's got to put on the suit. Um and so I really expected all of Marvel to be that way, like, well, you know, we got to do this a little bit different. But they just go for it every time, and so far it has worked so well on the movie screen.
Right.
And and I just, being a comic book fan from way back, man, being a reader from the days of my childhood, just seeing these things, you know, and I have hang-ups and nitpicks and problems here and there, but I hope y'all are enjoying it, because I'm telling you, it is so much fun to me. And knowing that you got Doctor Strange coming up, Doctor Strange turns everything in a weird way. I mean, like it adds a whole
Good.
new layer to stuff. You know, Ant-Man.
I
Ant-Man was
loved
the
Ant-Man. Yeah,
Ant-Man was such a surprise to me, you
me
know,
too.
and because I thought, well, I'm going to go see this just because it's a Marvel movie, but this will be their first strike. This is going to be where the kink in their armor starts to show. And it totally didn't. It was such a fun,
It
and
was.
the heart of that movie with him and his daughter, and you're just like, oh, it's just heartbreaking what this guy's going through and what he's put up with, and now he's finally making it right, but he can't really make it right. And it just I
So I do have a question for you, because I'm going
okay.
to give you a second there to grab your drink, because
Mhm.
that was an awesome
I'm sorry. I
Marvel
know I
role.
went off.
No,
I'm sorry.
no, I have a question based off that,
Mhm.
because obviously you love Star Wars, you love
Yeah.
Marvel.
Yeah.
I love Star Wars. I was a fan of Marvel way back when growing up, but now it's definitely recapturing things for me. Um, in today's Star Wars, can you do you think, with all these shows that are now coming on Disney Plus, is there that chance to have that same kind of feeling in new Star Wars that you do
Mhm.
for this new Marvel?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
that's really the question, because
Because we all know the sequel trilogy, there was a lot of divisiveness, right? I
you know,
mean,
yeah, you know,
but
I had a great experience with episode 7
me too.
of The
Loved it.
Force Awakens. I got with Riley and Bethany. We drove out to Texas to meet up with our friend Teresa from Disney Vault Talk and Fangirls Going Rogue and
Teresa
everything. And
Delgado, right?
yeah, Teresa
Yeah.
Delgado. And we watched the opening night at the Alamo Draft House in Austin, Texas. You know
Hmm.
what? It's a theater made for movie watching. I mean, like, that's the whole point of the Alamo Draft House experience, is it's meant to be for the serious movie fans. And the experience of going out there and hanging with friends was great. The movie ended, and I was in the midst of an identity crisis in that moment, because everyone looked immediately to me. Well, what'd you think? What'd you think? And I remember looking at them and thinking, don't disappoint them. Don't disappoint them. So I said, well, what did you think? And they're like, I loved it. I'm like, I'm so glad you did. And that was my response for so many people. Like, oh, I really loved it. I'm like, I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you, because I couldn't bring myself to say that I really liked it. There were a lot of things I did like,
Yes.
but about the sixth time I saw it, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I like this movie. I like it. You know, there was a lot to love about it and a lot to like, a lot to be critical of, you know, but that's fine. You
Sure.
know, I get it. There were things I had concerns going in as it was. Um, I saw The Last Jedi absolutely by myself. It's just how life worked and worked out. And so I was there on opening night. Now I was crowded into a crowded theater like you couldn't do in COVID days, you know.
Yeah.
And so the viewing experience wasn't the greatest. But I remember as I walked out, and again, it comes down to a conversation with Derek. Derek called, or he texted and said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "I'm just tired of seeing my heroes die."
Yep.
And that was really my big takeaway. It's like, knowing that Carrie Fisher had passed away, and knowing what they did in that movie, and all they had to do was tweak one or two things to allow Luke to live, to be an actual
100%.
presence in the third movie. that was the first my big takeaway, and then I began to chew on it more, and I think I might have seen it one other time in the theater, which was unheard of for me in a Star Wars movie. You
Hmm.
know, I'm Star Wars was like I'm going back again and again and again and again, and I think I saw Episode 7 7 or 8 times. You know, in the theater, um, but that happened. You know, and I don't want to
Oh,
litigate it.
no,
I'm just
no,
saying,
no, no.
I end up as I chew on it, I had a lot more problems with it, and so then there's what was going on with fandom at the time,
Yeah.
and it absolutely turned me off to Star Wars. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I guess that time is over, and I'm just going to have to. And there was a part of me that was really sad. I mourned Star Wars, you know, and so and then I got sent this link to the Clone Wars trailer
Mm.
to that season 7, and I was like, oh, well, what's this now? What? Well, hey there, Ahsoka. Hey there, Anakin and Obi-Wan. Hey, what? This seems like it's playing right into episode 3. What? This is great. This and like, and there, I was just like, I no, and I kept telling my heart, no, 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 don't you get geared up for this again. And of course, Mandalorian was coming, and Mandalorian for me was just kind of this anomaly. Like I'm like, we'll check it out and see. We actually got together with friends to watch the first night of Mandalorian. We all waited
Yep.
until, and we got together and had like a little pizza party that night to watch it, and some people here in town, um and the whole time I'm like, man, this is definitely a Filoni directed thing. Look at all these little Easter eggs and stuff thrown. I'm like, this is fun. This is great. This is so much fun. And and I keep thinking, I'm like, who do you think it is? 50 years old. They had
Right.
to be around in the Clone Wars. You know, do you think it may be one of the legacy characters? Do you think it may be someone we've heard of? Do you think it may be someone that was like a side character that we knew? Is it Lor Santeca? You know, who could this be? You know, and we kept throwing out theories, and they get in there, and there he is. There's Baby Yoda. And there was the shock that was heard, and suddenly, as that Baby Yoda began to sweep the culture, and every episode of Mandalorian got better and better, and it culminated in this final episode of this last season.
Oh,
I'm telling
yes.
you, dude, it was, I hate reaction videos, and I hate that I even watched any, because now they keep coming up in my recommendations. But I couldn't help but watch this one super cut of these reaction videos to Luke showing up at the end of season 2. Spoilers. And what I saw is I sat there like I almost got choked up. I almost got choked up as Luke, as I realized it was Luke. And I'm almost getting choked up talking about it now, because it's just like having met Warwick Davis. It's like this is what we had wanted and hoped for. We didn't want Ghost Luke dodging a lightsaber
Mm-hmm.
on a salt planet. You know, we wanted, and look, I used to feel like I needed to apologize for that. Like I don't have any right to say what. No, I do. This is what I wanted to see from Luke Skywalker in this era. I wanted to see someone who's fully in control of the Force, fully doing his thing, saving the day as only Luke Skywalker can. And as that X-wing landed, I really thought it was like, well, now we're going to see that dude that was Dave Filoni. He's going to get killed by these dark troopers.
Right.
It's a bad situation, but that's going to give them just the distraction they need to get out. And then the music changed, and I'm like, well, this is weird music. I guess it's going to be sad. Who all's going to die now? And then Baby Yoda touches the screen, and I'm like, that's a Jedi. And so immediately my mind goes to Ahsoka, because there's no way. But I'm like, why would she come back? She said she can't train him. Maybe she knows he's in danger. But I'm like, there's no way it's Luke. There's no way. And who would they get to play him? Like, all of those things are going through my mind.
Mine as well.
And then there's the cloaked figure walking down the hall. And I'm just sitting there. I refuse. It's one of those things where I refuse to get excited again. But I saw everyone have those same reactions on these reaction videos that I was having. And it was like this unifying fandom moment. And it was summed up in 2 words. It's Luke.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that everyone realized, because even when they see the green, and I was the same way. I saw the belt buckle, saw the green blade, but I refused to believe it until I saw the hand with the glove on it. And that's when I said it. That's when fandom cried out with one voice, it's Luke. And I'm telling you, watching those reaction videos, I was, it to me, more than anything else that has been done, with Star Wars since the Disney buyout. To me, that was that moment that's like, this is the most unifying force in fandom is this kind of storytelling. You know, there's not a soul who didn't like Baby Yoda. Even people who said, "Oh, he's too cute. I'm tired of."
Yeah.
They bought into the story of the Mandalorian, and to culminate in that climax of Luke, really the parallel of Luke versus what we got to see of Vader in Rogue One. I mean, like
Yes.
those are very parallel scenes, and I think
Very
that's done
much so.
intentionally. Um, but to see him just cut through those things, and it was done so well because you saw what a hard time the Mandalorian had with just one of them, you know, and you knew that there was no way they were going to survive this. They could not get out alive. Um,
I
and
I agree.
and here comes Luke, you know, and he saves the day, and it's everything you want Luke to be. And so I think that moment is one that generated as much passion and sheer joy for me as anything Marvel has done and anything Star Wars has done since episode 3, to be honest with you. Now, Rise of Skywalker, I was with some friends and my wife, and when all the ships show up to save the day, I'm just a sucker. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm a sucker for tropes. You know, going back and watching Rise of Skywalker now, I'm like, well, someone saw, well, you'll get this later. Somebody saw Endgame. You know, there's a lot that goes on right in when you watch Endgame, you're like, yeah, they did do this. But when all those ships show up and everything, and my wife said, she looked at me and she said, I saw 8-year-old Steve sitting there, you know, like, and to me, you can't ask for anything more from Star Wars. And so she said when we were watching The Mandalorian, she said, when I looked across the living room at you, I saw that same kid again when Luke was coming, when you realized it was Luke. And, you know,
Isn't that what we want? I mean,
that's
that's
all I want. Yeah, that's all
yeah.
I want out of
I
it. Yeah.
mean, I think looking at this, and don't get me wrong, I have two questions I have to ask you before we hop off here. But
Sure.
you know, I turned 50 this year. Okay,
Mhm.
it's a momentous occasion. You only get to do it once if you get there. And
Yeah.
but so my wife looks at me and she's like, I don't know another person who's your age who, you know, is busy with work and busy with life and everything. But once this comes on, or once this package shows up, you know, and they're like,
Yeah.
she's like, you're 8, you're 7, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, but I mean, you unfortunately you only get to be 7 or 8 once. Going back and feeling that again is just so refreshing, and it makes everything else seem a little bit better around you, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
You know, I'm so blessed because I can look back at my 7 and 8-year-old self and look back and say I had a great childhood. You
mhm,
know, I had parents who loved me. I had a roof over my head, and I understand that is in this world that is beyond blessed. I totally get that.
yes,
So I understand that for some people to feel like they're 7 or 8 again may not be the greatest feeling in the world. And you know, but hopefully everyone has something in their life that they look at and say, these were happier times. This was a happier time. And I don't even say happier. Like I would never want to go back and grow up again. I don't
no,
want to go back through that again. But to know that there are still things that can make me as excited as the child was, you know, the child that I was
mhm,
would get excited over things, you know. That I think that's special. And I think that, you know, for most of my life, Star Wars was that. It was this thing of just, oh, this is so cool, this is so neat. And then when you really sit and consider the themes and the depth of it and everything, then it begins to take on a whole new meaning and a whole new, you know, you realize just what George Lucas was doing as a filmmaker and what his goals were. Then it really kind of matters on a different level. But ultimately, you know, if you can just bring me the sheer joy and excitement
yep.
of what it was to be that kid watching those things and fire up my imagination, you know, um, that's all I need. You know, that's
No, I
really
agree.
all I need. So
Look, it's the little things in life, and you're right.
yeah,
The regular world's all out there, but this little touch of happiness and hope is a good thing. I did want to touch on one, um, Dave, right? Dave James,
Dave Jones,
Dave Jones. I'm sorry, my handwriting is for terrible.
that's all right.
He wanted me to ask you, um, when it comes to a future adversary in the future Star Wars movies, what is something you're looking for? I mean, we keep having Palpatine be
Yeah.
everything in every movie. Obviously,
Yeah.
I don't think that's the way it's going to be. So, what is an
Um,
adversary that you'd look
yeah,
for?
I've not dug into the High Republic stuff yet. I've heard good things. I'm iffy about it. I honestly stopped reading Star Wars books pretty much religiously, like I was reading them when the prequel started coming out, because I had Star Wars on the big screen again. I didn't need a
Hmm.
book. Um, and then once the prequels hit, everything was just off and running, and so I'd hit a book here or there, but I didn't read them religiously as I had. And so I'm not necessarily interested in jumping back into that realm. But so I don't know what kind of threat they're facing in that. As far as future movies go, it just depends. Like, I think one of the cool things about what's happened with the Mandalorian is the dealing with the remnants of the Empire.
Hmm.
But hearing about the shadow of the First Order that seems to be falling in the Outer Rim and that sort of thing, and no one's believing them, which leads into the reason that the whole sector gets blown up in the Force Awakens. Um, I think, depending on where we go in the timeline, I think what I'd like to see are just, I don't want a lot of shades of gray. I'll just say that. I want some good guys versus bad guys. I want black hats versus white hats. And I love the idea of the Jedi being something that's just kind of rumored to be out there.
I do too.
If we were to go out beyond the realm of the rise of Skywalker, um, there's an intriguing thing because Rey buries those lightsabers, but she still has hers, and one that's specific to her, and she is now the guardian of the Force. Is what I said early on, because the yellow blade, that's
Right.
what the Guardians of the Temple had in the Clone Wars and everything. And so I feel like she's kind of the guardian of the Force, but also means that she's got to be the one to hand it down. And so I just wonder if we were able to go far out from where the Rise of Skywalker was, if the Jedi could be the stuff of legend in a real way, where it's like, I hear they may exist, but I'm not sure. And so you have adventures like you have with the Mandalorian and that sort of thing. And you think the villain may be one thing, but then it turns around there's something even greater, but it's not Palpatine. Like, I think we need to be done with galactic empires and
Yeah.
Sith for a little bit in Star Wars and see what else is out there. Knowing that George Lucas, though, meant for these to be fairy tales or westerns. The thing is you can plug just about any genre into Star Wars and it works. And
Right.
so, um, but really, I want a definite bad black versus white, hat, kind of thing. And
Right.
I don't need anyone being redeemed at the end of the story. I need them to be wiped out, because they're evil, kind of thing. I don't need, and honestly, I guess at this point, and they did it on purpose, no more Skywalkers, blah blah blah. Okay, fine, but I do know that Grogu species lives to be, close to 900 years old. So let's catch up with him, down the road and see what he's out there battling against. The idea of the Yuuzhan Vong,
Hmm.
um, is to me a neat idea, an extra galactic threat that comes in, and you have to adapt to that threat, to be able to fight them. Uh, those stories kind of went on, I think,
It
a little too long. That
a
book
long
series
time.
went on,
Yeah.
but I think that the idea is a solid, sound, fun idea that could be explored.
Okay. So here's kind of my end here. It's not too big or anything like that, but obviously you probably have a favorite collectible that you
Mhm.
have.
Oh wow.
Um, maybe pick out one that you think, okay, maybe it's not the top one, but right just off the top of your head,
Mhm.
it's important to you. And then is there like a white whale, one that you're missing, that you're like, man, I've always wanted this. I know you talked about the AT-AT,
Mhm.
forever, and you got that and got it
Yep,
all
yep,
fixed and everything.
yep.
And then with that lead into maybe Chewy's Cantina, because I've really enjoyed the
Okay,
stuff you've done
sure.
there. So I know that they would all tie up things you can
Yeah,
get, things you want, and where you can
okay.
find some of that stuff.
Um, so I have a vintage Death Star playset that I think ranks right up there as one of my favorite pieces that I have. It was my brother's. I've had to add a piece or two here or there. With that particular play set, though, there was this little rope, this little plastic rope that hung on a hook for
Hmm.
Luke to swing over a bridge, basically. And that's the piece that everyone always lost, and it's one of those things I didn't know about for years. I got this thing when I was 10 years old because we moved from Athens, Georgia, where we lived, down to a little podunk town called Hazelhurst. And I guess out of guilt, my mom said, well, you can have your brother's old Death Star. And so it was mostly complete, but I never knew about the rope. Everything else was just fine and just had regular play wear. And I loved it, man. I played with that thing like a beast for the next year or so. Um, but then as a grown up, my mom was going through some of my brother's old stuff, and she had a little bag that had a bunch of figures and their weapons in them, that he'd had. And in that little baggie was the plastic rope for the Death Star.
Oh,
So, I've got a pretty complete Death Star. Now I've got to get some things kind of fixed. There's some posts and pillars and stuff that are busted, but I think that ranks up there as one of my favorite things that I have, next to my Imperial shuttle, which I bought the original Imperial shuttle I had as a child with birthday money. And so
they
that
always
was
mean more
always,
when you spend your own
yeah, it
money on them.
always means more when you spend your own money. As far as a white whale goes, something that I'm chasing down again, because I've been so selfish for most of my life in getting things. I off the top of my head, the only thing I can think of are there pieces and parts that I need, to make something, to fix something, up completely. So I have what is the thing called? It's the equivalent of a mini rig. It was a Power of the Force um indoor scout ranger, basically, and it's nothing at all. Like it is a little vehicle that one person fits on, and it has a big fin on the back, and they just have a little, it almost looks like a GI Joe toy rather than a Star Wars toy. But it has two little guns on the side, and they click,
Okay.
they plug in and they kind of click as you turn them. Well, one of the guns little pegs is broken off, and it doesn't stand there. But this thing, if you go and try to find it um on online, this thing goes for ridiculous
Hmm.
amounts of money. And it's just it's and so there's no way to even um to get that little gun unless I knew how to cast and mold my own stuff, and I don't. It's
3D
called this
printer. We're gonna have to get you a 3D
Yeah,
printer.
it's called the Security Scout, the
Okay.
Power of the Force Security Scout. I found it. Then I've got the old Ewok battle wagon, which again, this is
Hmm.
one of those things, never knew that this was going to be this big valuable thing. Well, it's got a few little broken pieces on there that I'd love to just replace. There's nothing missing. It is complete, but like some of the framework where it plugs into the holes and everything, the little tabs have busted off. And so again, because it's such a rare thing, now they have the Robin Hood version, the Kenner Robin Hood version, but that wood is darker and it doesn't
Yes.
match up, and I don't want that. I want um my Ewok battle wagon,
Right.
fixed. So then those are little things like I I don't care about a vinyl cape Jawa or a telescoping saber Luke. I would like to finish out my complete set of 96
Okay.
vintage figures, and I've got some of the last 17 that I've got to finish out with that. But other than that, when it comes to Star Wars, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty content.
I am as well. And you know what? During the COVID timeframe, I
Mhm.
went from having a little bit of Star Wars to a lot more
Yeah,
Star
man.
Wars.
Yeah, man.
Um, it was kind of my way to make it through. I mean,
Right.
shipments showed up at the house daily, which was great. It was like Christmas every morning. But yeah, and I found now that I've got my favorites and the things where I'm like I feel whole and I feel complete having these things. It's like I don't go out there every day and go, oh, I have to have this or I have to have that. It's much more of a, I really need this
Well,
one
I gotta
thing
tell you,
or
for the first time on this show, I'm realizing I'm pretty happy with what I got. Now, I did accidentally sell a vintage snow speeder. I'd like to get that back. I'd like to
okay.
get a vintage that I had that was complete. But I'm not like out here every day looking for the
Yeah,
hot deal. I'm just like, well, one day. I'm really excited for the retro style Mandalorian figures that are coming out.
those are great.
Because when you ask, do I open or not? I'm going to rip those bad boys off the card first and foremost and put them in my Cantina playset,
That's
my
awesome.
vintage Cantina playset, because they're made for that, you
Right.
know. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But yeah, so other than like some little bits and bobbles to make things complete, like here we go. Original Kenner vintage Power of the Force Security Scout vehicle complete, $239 or best offer from Germany. And that's the only one on eBay right now. So
no. You
yeah.
know what? We can dream, and sometime we'll pass across it at a thrift store or something like that.
You know what? I'm sorry. I've drug you on way too long.
No,
Dude, here's
no.
one for 250 in the Netherlands. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so I've got to figure out how to cast mold stuff so I can take that other gun from the other side and mold it up and make a new gun to put in there. But what's funny is I've got the gun, it's just missing a little tab that goes in there, and it'll kind of balance in there okay.
It's like my Darth Vader TIE fighter, the original one I have, where now the inner workings don't work anymore, and the wing doesn't stay on now, and it's painful, but it's like, okay, it'll sit, but I can't get it up and move it around, you know. So
we can fix that. We can fix that. Have you seen that awesome video?
Yes.
Of the restoration of the Millennium Falcon? Yeah. That's now my goal in life. That's what I want to be. I want to be the guy who remember Toy Story 2, the little old man that comes in and he's fixing up Woody. That's what I want to be in life. You know, it's like people are like, don't you love being a pastor? Sure I do. But I would rather repair old toys. I would rather restore old toys. That's what
Oh my gosh. Well, hey, I feel like I've kept you. You have been wonderful, and you've given me so many. You get your stories and tales are great. So don't worry about that. But hour and a half, I've kept you on here talking Star Wars and Marvel and everything else. I really appreciate it.
I haven't even got to Masters of the Universe and Transformers yet.
I had that on my list. I was like, well, if Steve goes too fast, we'll talk about He-Man, Master of the Universe.
If Steve goes too fast. Now, you say you listen to my shows. I feel like you don't.
No, I do. I just wasn't sure if you're like, I don't want to talk to this guy. And if I'd have to bring up tons of topics, I was ready. So
I understand. Well, I will circle back real quick to talk about, you mentioned the Cantina.
Yes.
Chewy's Cantina on Facebook. That's a group on Facebook that it's you have to ask to join and everything, but once you do, they don't have a tight screening process. But it is a group of collectors who are just trying to help out other collectors. They do sales every 2 weeks with some of the guys in the group, and a lot of what they're selling is more modern stuff. Some guys will sell some 3D printed stuff they do. It's neat to kind of see what everybody has and what's out there, that people put in. I think right now this weekend, I think they've got what's called the yard sale or the garage sale that they're doing, and that starts or that would have been, at the time this is released, that would have been Saturday. Okay. But they always do, and they just have different sellers that are going to take an hour or two during the day and do that live from that page, and that's just kind of the fun things they do. Lucas, who started the page and everything, he's a friend of mine from right here where I live in Rome, Georgia, and we met at Force Friday one night, and became fast friends. He's also a pastor.
I feel like a better person just talking to you and all these contacts you have today.
Well,
so
you're related though. You're related to some You're related to people in ministry, so you're good to go. You're good to go. But and then they do like claim sales throughout each week, where whoever's in there want to sell something can, or if you're looking for something, you can kind of post what you're looking for. And generally people are trying to help each other out in the group. They're not trying to scalp or to do anything that's shady or underhanded or that sort of thing, but they generally seem to be trying to help each other out. So, you join up and let them know Steve sent you over there, so that Lucas knows I'm still a vital part of that. But what we do on Geek Out Loud now, apparently monthly, is we'll do like a collector spotlight with some of the people that are here in that group, or they're in that group, and kind of talk to them about their collecting experience and everything else that's going on there. So, but yeah, dude, when I get going on this stuff, I could go for hours and hours and hours and just and love every minute of it. And meanwhile, you'd be like, I'm sorry, dear, fat one won't shut up.
No, actually, between Adam and you, I always tell people, and I tell my co-hosts all the time, less of me, more of you. That's it, the Jimmy Fallon, David Letterman, Johnny Carson way. Less of me, more of you. So you've more than done your share, because you've entertained me. So that means you'll probably entertain everybody else who listens. But
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
and again, like I said, it's just a real pleasure for me, because yeah, I've heard your voice 100,000 times, and to actually be able to have a conversation with you and talk Star Wars and fandom is just great. So how can people again follow you, so I don't give them the wrong information?
You know what? I'm on Twitter. The best way, I guess, is at Geek Out Loud.
Okay.
It's easy to remember that, and then from there you can see all the other stuff, or the Geek Out Loud podcast you can find wherever you download podcasts. I think that's pretty much available on just about everything. I don't know. I don't know if I've got that registered on everything, but if you go to the website at geekoutpodcast.com, I think there may be a feed that you can plug into your favorite podcatcher or whatever if you want to do that. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's kind of the best place for your audience, probably, is Geek Out Loud.
Well, I tell you what, thank you
Yeah, thank you.
for entertaining all of us for the past 10 plus years. And
I appreciate it.
hopefully our paths will cross at some convention or celebration or something. And
Sure.
I really appreciate it. And to everybody else, follow Steve on all those ways. You will get your money's worth. I just gave you a snippet here today. The rest of his stuff is even better. And he's a wild man with a lot of entertainment. So Steve, thank you.
Thank you, bud.
To our friends at Rule the Galaxy. Again, follow us at Rule the Galaxy SW on Twitter. Email us at ruletheGalaxySW@gmail.com. And until next week, may the force be with you.